kindness. I appreciate it. I apologize in advance if I don't measure up to what I expected myself. Pretty much, I apologize if this is shit. I'm just apologizing to my future self. Anyway. But on the off chance that I get chatty with myself, I decided to do YouTube instead of Twitch for right now anyway. We'll see. I'm not feeling particularly chatty right now though. Let's see here. I think that it might behoove me to Anyway, excuse me, I just saw something, but I got distracted. This guy.
It's accessible on Venus.
Right, and this is useful to remember.
Shout out to Venus.
You know, to frame it as constraint application is useful for when you zoom out to the bigger picture of the universe and looking at the chemistry of the universe and then starting to apply assembly theory.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. But we've also pissed off the chemists now.
Oh,
okay.
They're pretty happy, but well, most of them.
No, everybody deep down is happy, I think. They're just sometimes feisty. That's how they show how they have fun.
Everyone is grumpy on some days when you challenge. The problem with this paper is it's almost like I went to a part. It's like used to do this occasionally when I was young. Is go to a meeting. And just find a way to offend everyone at the meeting simultaneously. Yeah. Even the factions that don't like each other, they're all unified in their hatred of you, just offending them. This paper, it feels like the person that went to the party and offended everyone simultaneously, so stop fighting with themselves and just focused on this paper.
Maybe just a little insider interesting information. What were the editors of Nature, like what, the reviews and so on, how difficult was that process? Because this is a pretty, big paper.
Yeah, I mean, when we originally sent the paper, and the editor said that, this was quite a long process. We sent the paper, and the editor gave us some feedback, and said, I don't think it's that interesting. It's not, or it's hard. It's a hard concept, and we asked, and the editor gave us some feedback. And Sarah and I took a year to rewrite the paper.
Was the nature of the feedback very specific on this part, or was it like what are you guys smoking? What kind of?
Yeah, it was kind of the latter. What are you smoking?
What he's smoking.
But polite and there's promise.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the editor was really critical, but in a really professional way.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, this was the way science should happen. So when it came back, we had too many equations in the paper. If you look at the preprint, there's just equations everywhere, like 23 equations. And when I said to Abhishek, who was the first author, we've got to remove all the equations. But my assembly equation staying in, Abhishek was like, no, we can't. I said, well, look, if we want to explain this to people, there's a real challenge. And so Sarah and I went through I think it was actually 160 versions of the paper, but we got to version 40 or something. We said, right, zero it, start again. So we wrote the whole paper again. We knew the entire...
Amazing.
And we just went bit by bit and said, what is it we want to say? And then we sent the paper in, and to our... We expected it to be rejected and not even go to review. And then we got notification back, it had gone to review, and we were like, oh my god, it's so going to get rejected. How's it going to get rejected? Because the first assembly paper that on the mass spec we sent to Nature went through 6 rounds of review and was rejected. right? And was by a chemist who just said, "I don't believe you. You must be committing fraud." A long story, probably a boring story, but in this case, it went out to review. The comments came back, and the comments were incredibly. No, they were very deep comments from all the reviewers. There were, but the nice thing was, the reviewers were kind of very critical, but not dismissive. They were like, "Oh, really? Explain this, explain this, explain this, explain this. Are you sure it's not Komagolorov? Are you sure it's not this?" And we went through, I think, 3 rounds of review, pretty quick. And it went, yeah.
God.
But maybe you could just comment on the whole process. You've published some pretty huge papers on all kinds of topics within chemistry and beyond. Some of them have some little spice in them, a little spice of crazy. Like Tom Waite says, "I like my Tom with a little drop of poison." There's, it's not a mundane paper. So, what's it like psychologically to go through all this process, to keep getting rejected, to get reviews from people that don't get the paper, or all that kind of stuff? Just from a question of a scientist, like what is that like?
I think it's I mean, this paper for me kind of, because this wasn't the first time we tried to publish assembly theory at the highest level. The Nature Communications paper on the mass spec, on the idea, went to Nature and got rejected. Went through 6 rounds of review and got rejected, I just was so confused when the chemist said, "This can't be possible. I do not believe you can measure complexity using mass spec." And also, by the way, complex molecules can randomly form. And we're like, but
he's
look at the
using
data.
mass
The data says.
Oh, but he does bring up NMR. Okay. Sorry, I've been.
And we went, and I just wouldn't give up.
Just kind of
But the editor in the
spec.
end was just like the different editors actually, right?
What's behind that never giving up? It's like
Just a
when
little
you're sitting there, 10 o'clock in the evening, there's a melancholy feeling that comes over you. You're like, okay, this is rejection number 5. Or it's not rejection, but
there's
maybe
a
it feels like
melancholy
rejection
feeling
because
that comes over you.
The comments.
I like the way that
you
is
totally
said.
don't get it. Like, what gives you strength to keep going?
What gives you strength to keep
I
going?
don't know.
I don't know. God. For me.
I don't normally get emotional about papers, but
he says he's an atheist, so I don't know. I don't know how atheists do it. God bless him.
it's not about giving up because you want to get it published and you want the glory or anything. It's just like, why don't you understand? And so, what I did, what I would just is try to be as rational as possible and say, yeah, you didn't like it. Tell me why, and then, sorry, silly.
And
Never get emotional about papers normally, but
no,
I
think
what we did,
a
you just
paper is
compressed
perfectly
like 5 years of angst from this.
Getting emotional
So
over a
it's been
paper
rough.
is an extremely
It's not
sophisticated
just rough.
thing.
It's like
I
it happened. I came up with the
want to
assembly
shake this man's
equation.
hand one day.
Remote from Sarah in Arizona and the people at SFI. I felt like
It's
I
not
was a
even about
mad
being
person,
sophisticated.
like
That was
the guy depicted
What
in
the hell is going
in A
on?
Beautiful Mind, who was just like
course.
not the actual genius part, but just the
crazy
gibberish.
Yeah.
Because I kept writing expanded, and I have no mathematical ability at all, and I was making these mathematical expansions where I kept seeing the same motif again. I was like, oh, I think this is a copy number, the same string is carrying again and again and again. I couldn't do the math. And then I realized the copy number fell out of the equation and everything collapsed down. I was like, oh, that works, kind of. So we submitted the paper, and then when it was almost accepted, right, the mass spec one, and there was astrobiologists said great, a mass spectroscopist said great, and the chemist went, nonsense, like biggest pile of nonsense ever, fraud, And I was like, but why fraud? And they just said, just because. And I was like, well, and And I could not convince the editor in this case. The editor was just so pissed
It
off.
got
Because they see it
stonewalled.
as like a kind of, a,
I think I'm using that properly.
you're wasting my time. And I would not give up. I went and dissected,
I
all
find
the
this story
parts. And
so
I think, although, I
inspirational.
mean, I got upset about it, it was kind of embarrassing actually, but I guess.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful. Thank you, Lex.
But it was just trying to understand why they didn't like it. So there were part of me was like really devastated, and a part of me was super excited because I'm like, they can't tell me why I'm wrong. And this kind of goes back to, when I was at school, I was in a kind of learning difficulties class, and I kept going to the teacher and say,
with this as
well. What do I do today to prove I'm smart? And they were like, nothing, you can't. I was like, give me a job, give me something to do. Give me a job to do, something to do as we, and I kind of felt like that a bit when I was arguing with and not arguing, there was no ad hominem, I wasn't telling the editor they were idiots or anything like this, or the reviewers. I kept it strictly like factual. And all I did is I just kept knocking it down bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. It was ultimately rejected and it got published elsewhere. And then the actual experimental data. So this is kind of, in this paper, the experimental justification was already published. So when we did this one, and we went through the versions, and
experimental
and then we sent
justification
it in, and
was already published.
in the end, it just got accepted. We were like, well, that's kind of cool, right? This is kind of like, some days you had, the student, sorry, the first author was like, I can't believe it got accepted. I was like, nor am I. But it's great. It's like, it's good. And then when the paper was published, I was not expecting the backlash. I was expecting computational. No, actually, I was just expecting one person who's been trolling me for a while about
I like that.
just to
I like
carry on
that word,
trolling.
experimental.
But I didn't expect the backlash. And then, a while back, computational. But it's great. The first author was like, some days you had, the student, sorry, the first author was, in the end, it just got accepted. We were like, well, that's kind of cool, right? This is kind of like, some days you had, the student, sorry, the first author was.
Wait, hold on.
So this is where, and then the actual experimental data. So this is kind of, in this paper, the experimental justification was already published. So when we did this one, and we went through the versions, and then we sent it in, and in the end, it just got accepted. We were like, well, that's kind of cool, right? This is kind of like, some days you had, the student, sorry, the first author was like, I can't believe it got accepted. I was like, nor am I. But it's great. It's like, it's good. And then when the paper was published, I was not expecting the backlash. I was expecting computational.
I kind of regret.
No, actually, I was just expecting one person who'd been trolling me for a while about it,
like
just to carry on trolling. But I didn't expect the backlash.
LinkedIn asked for my opinion on something, and I changed my mind.
And apologized, and the editor was like, "What are you apologizing for? It's a great paper. Of course, it's going to get backlash. You said some controversial stuff, but it's awesome." And so,
I think it's a beautiful story of perseverance.
Like,
and
that is
the backlash
what
is just a negative word for
persevere.
Discourse.
Perseverance.
Which I think is beautiful.
I think you, as I said,
we will persevere.
When it got accepted,
we will persevere.
And people were saying, we're kind of like hacking on it. And I was like, papers are not gold medals. The reason I wanted to publish that paper in Nature is because it says, hey, there's something before biological evolution. You have to have that if you're not a creationist, by the way. This is an approach. First time someone has put a concrete mechanism,
and I believe in biological
a concrete
evolution,
quantification,
obviously.
And what comes next, you're pushing on, is the mechanism.
Biological evolution,
and
at
that's
least
what
for
we need
me,
to get to, is autocatalytic sets, self-replicating
I
molecules,
feel like that's
some other
evidence.
features that come in.
I don't know. Maybe not.
And
I
the
see how
fact
not.
that
But
this
then,
paper has been so discussed, for me, is a dream come true.
I don't know.
It doesn't get better than that. If you can't accept a few people hating it, and the nice thing is, the thing that really makes me happy, is that no one has attacked the actual physical content. Like, you can measure the assembly index, you can measure selection now. So either that's right or either that's helpful or unhelpful.
Dude, he might actually get his name written in a textbook or something.
If it's helpful, it'll help people build scaffold on it, and we'll start to converge to a new paradigm. So I think that that's the thing that I wanted to see, my colleagues, authors, collaborators.
Maybe I'm
and
overhyping
people were
it.
like,
And if I am, I
you just published
apologize.
this
I don't mean
paper.
to
You're a
overhype.
chemist. Why have you done this? Like,
He's
who
got
are you
Fiji water.
to be doing
Maybe that's why I
evolutionary
got
theory?
Fiji water. I saw that Fiji
Like, well,
water and was all subconscious.
I don't know. I mean, sorry. Did I need to
Who's
get
anyone to do anything? Well, I'm glad you did. Let me just, before coming back to origin of life and these kinds of questions, you mentioned learning difficulties. I didn't know about this. So what was it like?
I wasn't very good at school,
Put
right?
in parentheses, organic
This is
life.
when you were very young?
Yeah. Well, but in primary school, my handwriting was really poor, and apparently I couldn't read, and my mathematics was very poor. So they just said this is a problem. They identified it. My parents kind of at the time were confused because I was busy taking things apart, buying electronic junk from the shop, trying to build computers and things. And then once I got out of, when I was, I think, about the major transition in my stupidity, everyone thought I wasn't that stupid. Basically, everyone thought I was faking. I like stuff, and I was faking wanting to be. I always wanted to be a scientist. So 5, 6, 7 years old, I'd be a scientist, take things apart. And everyone's
How lucky.
Yeah, this guy wants to be a scientist, but he's an idiot. And so,
not just lucky, though. I'm sure she's not just there.
So everyone was really confused, I think,
is
at first, because I wasn't smarter than I, was claiming to be. And then I just basically didn't do well in the test. And I went down and down and down and down. And then,
I
and I was kind of like, this is really embarrassing. I really like maths, and everyone says I can't do it.
The opposite.
I really like physics and chemistry and all that science, and people say you can't read and write. And so I found myself in a learning difficulties class at the end of primary school and the beginning of secondary school. In the UK, secondary school is like 11, 12 years old. And I remember being put in the remedial class, and the remedial class was basically full of three types of people. There were,
you see, if I went and did stuff like that in real life, the world can't function that way.
Yeah. And there were people who couldn't speak English.
And it doesn't matter.
And there were people that really had learning difficulties.
And I see why people do the things they do if they don't really care about morality, I suppose.
The one thing I can objectively remember,
because I'll do it too. I don't feel the moral
I could read.
Constraints
I like reading.
In this game
I read
that
a lot.
I do in space-time.
But something in me, I'm a bit of a rebel. I refused to read what I was told to read. And I found it difficult to read individual words in the way they were told. But anyway,
I didn't read, but it wasn't because I refused to. It was just because I couldn't pay attention. Not unless it was like a really interesting
we don't understand
thing.
this.
I remember Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe.
I
That's
always
an
knew I wanted to be a
example of a book I
scientist,
was
but I
able
didn't really know what that meant. And I realised you had to go to university, and I thought I could just go to university. It's like curious, but like, no. You need to have these. You have to be able to enter these exams to get this grade point average. And the fact is, the exams you've been entered into, you're not. You're just going to get C, D, or E. You can't even get A, B, or C. Right? These are the UK GCSEs. I was like, oh shit.
Where is this
thing?
And
I said, can you just put me into the higher exam? I said, no, you're going to fail. There's no chance. So my father kind of intervened and said, just let him go in the exams. And they said, he's definitely going to fail. It's a waste of time, waste of money. And he said, well, what if we paid? So they said, well, okay. So you didn't actually have to pay. You had to pay if I failed. So I took the exams and passed them, fortunately. I didn't get the top grades, but I got into A-levels. But then that also kind of limited what I could do at A-levels. I wasn't allowed to do A-level maths.
Me neither.
What do you mean you weren't allowed to?
Because I was
in the normal. I was in the stupid kid math.
I had a C.
Well, not stupid.
But they wouldn't let me go into the
ABC
ABC for maths because of some kind of coursework requirement back then. So the top grade I could have got was a C, so C, D, or E. So I got a C. And then I got a lot of C's too. Well, not kind of AS level maths, which is this half intermediate, but to go to university. But in the I liked chemistry. I had a good chemistry teacher, so in the end I got to university.
That's what to do it. Good.
So through that kind of process, I think for kids in that situation, it's easy to start believing that you're not. Well, how do I put it? That you're stupid.
Yeah.
And basically give up. That you're just not good at math. You're not good at school. So this is by way of advice for people, for interesting young kids right now. Experiencing the same thing. What was the source of you not giving up there?
I have no idea, other than I I really like not understanding stuff. For me, when I not understand something, I didn't feel like I didn't understand anything. But
See, I'm
now,
similar,
but back
except
then,
I
I was
realized that I
I
have to
remember when I
fully
was like,
understand
I don't know,
something.
I
Otherwise, I
tried to
just
build a
can't
laser when I
pay
was like
attention.
8.
Or it's not even I
And I
can't pay
thought, how
attention. I
hard
just
could it
things
be?
don't.
Like,
I don't know. I
and
just
I
need to understand all the
basically, I was
details.
going to
And if I
build a CO. I was
do,
going to build a CO2 laser, and I was like, right, I think I need some partially coated mirrors, I need some carbon dioxide, and I need a high voltage. So I kind of, and I was like, I didn't have and I was so stupid, right? I was kind of so embarrassed.
By the way,
make enough CO2, I actually
appreciate
set
you
a
watching
fire
this if you're watching.
and try to filter the flame.
Oh, nice.
To trap enough CO2.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I hope I'm not making too much of an
failed,
ass
and I
of myself.
burnt half the garage down. So my parents were not very happy about
But
that.
you never know.
So that was one thing. I was like, I really like first principle thinking, and so
Not in real time, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it, right?
I remember being super curious and being determined to find answers. And so the kind of when people give advice about this, well, I ask for advice about this. I don't really have that much advice other than don't give up. And one of the things I try to do
oh Lord,
as a chemistry professor in my group is I hire people
having future me watch
that I think that, you know, I'm kind of, who am I, if they're
me,
persistent
enough, than
who am I to deny them the chance? Because, you know, people gave me a chance and I was able to do stuff.
Well, future me can't be in
do you believe in yourself?
Not in real time.
I love being around smart people, and I love confusing smart people.
I could stream
and
it.
when I'm confusing smart people,
or not stream
you know,
it,
not by stealing their wallets and hiding it somewhere, but if I can confuse smart people, that is the one piece of hope that I might be doing something interesting.
I could start recording
like as a gradient to optimize.
No.
Yeah, hang out with smart people and confuse them.
Yeah.
And the more confusing it is, the more there's something there.
And as long as they're not telling you just a complete idiot, and they give you different reasons.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm, you know, if everyone, it's like with assembly theory, and people said, oh, it's wrong. And I was like, why? And they're like, and no one could give me a consistent reason. They said, oh, because it's been done before, or it's just Kolmogorov, or it's just this, that, and the other. So I think the thing that I like to do is, and in academia, it's hard, right? Because people are critical, but I mean, you know, the criticism, I mean, although I got kind of upset about it earlier, which is kind of silly, but not silly, because obviously it's hard work being on your own or with a team spatially separated, really like during lockdown, and try to keep everyone on board and be, you know, have some faith.
There's a difference between being intellectually,
I always wanted to have a new idea,
you know.
And so, you know, I like a new idea, and I want to nurture it as long as possible. And if someone can give me actionable criticism, that's why I think I was trying to say earlier when I was kind of like stuck for words.
Not wasting
Give me actionable
time
criticism.
on nonsense.
You know, it's wrong. Okay, why is it wrong? So,
or things that are wrong.
Your equation's incorrect for this, or your method is wrong. And then so what I try and do is get enough criticism from people to then triangulate and go back. And I've been very fortunate in my life that I've got great colleagues, great collaborators, funders, mentors, and people that will take the time to say, you're wrong because. And then what I have to do is integrate the wrongness and go, oh, cool, maybe I can fix that. And I think criticism is really good. People have a go at me because I'm really critical. I'm like, but I'm not criticizing
with regards to
you as a person. I'm just criticizing the idea and trying to make it better and say, well, what about this? And, you know, and sometimes I'm kind of, you know, my filters are kind of, you know.
What happened to my...
truncated in some ways. I'm just like, that's wrong. What to do this? And people are like, oh my God, you just told me, you destroyed my life's work. I'm like, relax. No, I'm just like, let's make it better.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't do that enough because
this guy's hilarious. I love it. Let's make it better.
We're either personally critical, which isn't helpful, or we don't give any criticism at all because we're too scared.
Yeah,
I'm scared of becoming scared.
Pretty aggressively critical, but
I mean, I already am, but
every
like
time I've seen it,
I'm,
the
you know,
idea,
my
not the
bravery
person.
with criticism.
I'm sure I make
For the
mistakes in
sake
that. I mean, I you know,
of
I argue lots with lots. I mean, I
sanity.
argue lots with Sarah, and she's like kind of shocked. I've argued with Yasha in the past, and he's like,
So it's not
you're
really
just
even
making
bravery.
Yasha
It's
Buck, and
just
you're like, you're just
survival
making that
instinct.
up. I'm like,
Survival
no,
instinct.
not quite, but
You
kind
know,
of.
keeps
Yeah.
me in check for right now.
You know, I had a big argument with Sarah about time.
But I
because know
don't want to
time
wake up
doesn't
one
exist.
day
I'm like,
and
no,
be so
time does
afraid of
exist. And
criticism.
now,
But actually, no,
as
that
she
does happen
realized
from time to time.
that her conception of assembly theory
It's terrible. It's just
and my
terrible.
conception of assembly theory were the same thing, necessitated us to abandon the fact that time is eternal, to actually really fundamentally question how the universe produces combinatorial novelty.
So time is fundamental for assembly theory. I'm just trying to figure out where you and Sarah converge.
So I think assembly theory is fine in this time right now, but I think it helps us understand that something interesting is going on. So there's, and I've been really inspired by a guy called Nick Gizem. I'm going to butcher his argument, but I love his argument a lot, so I hope he forgives me if he hears about it. But basically, if you want free will, time has to be fundamental. And we can go,
I follow with that.
if you want time to be fundamental, you have to give up on Platonic mathematics, and you have to use intuitionist mathematics. By the way, and again, I'm going to butcher this, but basically, Hilbert said that, you know, infinite numbers are allowed, and I think it was Brouwer said no, you can't. All numbers are finite. So they're kind of like with. So let's go back a step, because it was like people were going to say, assembly theory seems to explain that large combinatorial space allows you to produce things like life and technology. And that large combinatorial space is so big, it's not even accessible to a Sean Carroll, David Deutsch multiverse. That physicists saying that that all of the universe already exists in time is provably, that's a strong word, not correct. That we are going to know that the universe as it stands, the present, the way the present builds the future, so big, the universe can't ever contain the future. And this is a really interesting thing. I think Max Tegmark has this mathematical universe. He says, you know, the universe is kind of like a block universe. And I apologize to Max if I'm getting it wrong, but people think you can just move. You have the stat, you have the initial, it life and technology. And that large combinatorial space is so big, it's not even accessible to a Sean Carroll. But I mean, think you're going to abandon the fact that time is eternal, to actually really fundamentally question how the universe produces time. That her conception of assembly theory and my conception of assembly theory were the same thing, necessitated us to abandon the fact that time is eternal, to actually really fundamentally question how the universe produces combinatorial novelty.
So time is fundamental for assembly theory. I'm just trying to figure out where you and Sarah converge.
So I think assembly theory is fine in this time right now, but I think it helps us understand that something interesting is going on. So there's, and I've been really inspired by a guy called Nick Gizem. I'm going to butcher his argument, but I love his argument a lot, so I hope he forgives me if he hears about it. But basically, if you want free will, time has to be fundamental. And we can go, if you want time to be fundamental, you have to give up on Platonic mathematics, and you have to use intuitionist mathematics. By the way, and again, I'm going to butcher this, but basically, Hilbert said that, you know, infinite numbers are allowed, and I think it was Brouwer said no, you can't. All numbers are finite. So they're kind of like with. So let's go back a step, because it was like people were going to say, assembly theory seems to explain that large combinatorial space
David Hilbert
allows you to produce things like life and technology. And that large combinatorial space is so big, it's not even accessible to a Sean Carroll, David Deutsch multiverse. that physicists saying that that all of the universe already exists in time.
19th, early 20th
Provably-
centuries. What do you do? Developed a
Strong
range of
words.
fundamental ideas, including invariant theory.
Not
Never heard
correct.
of that. I don't think.
That we are going to know
Calculus
that
of
the
variations.
universe as it stands, the present, the way the present builds the
Commutative
future,
algebra,
so
algebraic
big,
number theory,
the universe
foundations
can't
of
ever
geometry,
contain the future.
spectral theory.
And this is a really interesting thing. I think Max Tegmark has this mathematical universe. Where he says, you know,
And
the
its
universe is
application
kind
in
of like a
integral
block
equations,
universe. And
physics,
I
and
apologize to
thought.
Max if I'm getting it wrong, but people
Proof
think you
theory,
can just
oh.
move. You have you have the initial conditions, and you can run the universe right to the end and go backwards and forwards in that universe. That is not correct.
Let me load that in. The universe is not big enough to contain the future.
Yeah.
Huh.
That's why. That's it.
So
But-
that's a beautiful way of saying that time is fundamental.
Yes, and the you can have, and that's what this is why the law of the excluded middle, something is true or false, only works in the past.
Oh, dang.
Is it going to snow in New York next week or in Austin? You might in Austin say probably not. In New York, you might say yeah. If you go forward to next week and say, did it snow in New York last week? True or false? You can answer that question. The fact that the law of the excluded middle cannot apply to the future explains why time is fundamental.
Well, I mean that's a good example, intuitive example, but it's possible that we might be able to predict
The law
you know,
of the excluded
whether it's going
middle.
to snow if we had perfect information.
I think
You're saying it not.
Impossible. Impossible. So here's why.
Yeah.
I'll make a really quick argument, and this argument isn't mine. It's Nick's and a few other people.
Can you explain his view on time being fundamental?
Yeah. So I'll give my view, which kind of resonates with his, but basically, it's
thank
very
goodness.
simple. Actually, it would say that free will, your ability to design and do an experiment, is exercising free will. So he used that thought process, but I never really thought about it that way, and that you actively make decisions. I do think that I used to think that free will was a kind of consequence of just selection, but I'm kind of understanding that human free will is something really interesting, and he very much inspired me. But I think that what Sarah Walker said that inspired me as well, that these will converge, is that I think that the universe is very big, huge, but actually the place that is largest in the universe right now, the largest place in the universe is Earth.
Yeah, I've seen you say that, and boy,
Wait, what?
That's an interesting one to process. What do you mean by that? Earth is the biggest place in the universe.
Because we
Yeah.
have this combinatorial scaffolding going all the way back from Luca. So you've got cells that can self-replicate, and then you go all the way to terraforming the Earth. You've got all these architectures, the amount of selection that's going on, biological selection, just to be clear, biological evolution. And then you have multicellularity, then animals and abstraction. And with abstraction, there was another kick, because you can then build architectures and computers and cultures and language. And these
And
things are the
learning
biggest
language
things that exist in
models.
the universe, because we can just build architectures that couldn't naturally arise anywhere. And the further that distance goes in time, and there's kind of, it's gigantic. And
From a complexity perspective.
yeah,
Okay, wait a minute. But I mean, I know you're being poetic, but how do you know there's not other Earth-like? How do you know? You're basically saying Earth is really special. It's awesome stuff as far as we look out. There's nothing like it going on. But how do you know there's not nearly infinite number of places where cool stuff like this is going on?
I agree, and I would say, I'll say again that Earth is the most gigantic thing we know in the universe combinatorially. We know.
We know.
Now,
Okay, yeah.
now, I guess, this is just purely a guess, I have no data, but other than hope. Well, maybe not hope, no, I have some data, that every star in the sky probably has planets.
Yep.
And life is probably emerging on these planets, but the amount of contingency that is associated with life is that I think the combinatorial space associated with these planets is so different. We're never going to, our causal cones are never going to overlap, or not easily. And this is the thing that makes me sad about alien life. Why we have to create alien life in the lab as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Because
Why do we have to do it as
I
quickly as
don't
possible?
know if we are going to be able to build architectures that will intersect with alien intelligence and architectures.
Intersect, you know what I mean, in time or space.
Time and the ability to communicate.
The ability to communicate.
Yeah. My biggest fear, in a way, is that life is everywhere, but we become infinitely more lonely because of our scaffolding in that combinatorial space. Because it's so big. And because...
So you're saying the constraints created by the environment that led to the factory of Darwinian evolution are just like this little tiny cone in a nearly infinite combinatorial space.
Exactly.
So there's other cones like it, and what?
Honestly,
why can't we
I
communicate with other?
am okay with
just because we can't
not
create it
really doing
doesn't mean
anything
we
with
can't
the
appreciate the
alien life.
creation, right? Like
It's not that I don't find it
detect the
interesting. I
creation.
just
I truly don't know, but it's an excuse for me to ask for people to give me
more
money to make a
interested
planet
about
simulator.
Yeah,
the
right.
unknowns
If I can make-
with regard to Earth.
With a different kind
like
of
another shameless say. It's like, give me money. I need money.
This was all a long plug for a planet simulator.
I also
it's like,
have
you know,
Hey, I'll be the first in line to do
I
it.
wouldn't say they're nightmares, but like just
my
dreams,
Rick
high
garage has
anxiety
run out of
dreams,
room, you
where
know?
like I'm
No,
And this is a planet simulator? You mean like a different
like-
kind of planet?
Yeah.
With different sets of
not
environments and
quite
pressures.
in
Exactly.
orbit.
If we could basically
no,
recreate
well, I'm kind of like
the
in orbit.
selection before biology, as
And,
we know it, that gives rise to a different
It
biology.
just gives me a lot of
We
anxiety
should be able to put
in
the
dreams
constraints
when
on where to
you
look
know,
in the
I'm
universe.
like, I'm like in
here's
like
the
an
thing.
airplane or something.
Here's my dream.
Yeah.
My dream is that by creating life in the lab,
And
based upon constraints we understand, like let's go for Venus
just have
type life or Earth
anxiety
type life or
about-
something again. Do Earth 2.0. Screw it. Let's do Earth 2.0.
You know,
and Earth
leaving
2.0
orbit.
has a different genetic alphabet. Fine,
not-
it's
and
fine.
especially not-
different
and then not being
protein
able to get
alphabet.
back.
Fine.
I wouldn't
Have cells and
that's
evolution, all
something
that stuff.
I have
We will then be able to say,
anxiety about in my
okay,
dreams.
life is a more general
So
phenomenon.
I don't know.
Selection is more
I'm
general
quite happy here.
than what we think is the chemical constraints on life.
Maybe
And we can point to James Webb and other telescopes at other planets
no.
that we are
I'm
in
happy
that
here.
zone. We are most likely to combinatorially
I wouldn't want to be
overlap
trapped
with.
on.
Right. So because we
Sure.
so there are chemistry
You're looking for
equivalent-
some overlap.
and then we can then basically shine light on them literally and look at light
Aside
coming
from
back
just
and
physical
apply
parameters,
advanced
which is-
assembly theory to general theory of
Clearly we
language
can get-
that we'll get
We can
and
leave
say,
orbit, so
huh,
that's okay.
we in that signal
So that is actually
it
really
looks
cool
random,
that we
but there's a
visited the
copy
moon,
number. Oh,
allegedly.
this random set of things that
I
shouldn't
asked my
be
dad
that,
if he
that looks like
thought that the
a
moon
true
landing was
random
fake, and
number
he got really
generator
upset and was like, I
has
saw that on TV.
structure as
I'm
a
like, okay.
not Kolmogorov AIT
But I
type
do
structure,
believe that
but
we
evolutionary
did.
structure
I don't
by
know, I
assembly
don't- I
theory,
don't think they
and we
did that
start to.
ridiculous.
But I would say that because I'm a shameless assembly theorist.
Yeah.
I'm a shameless assembly
It just
theorist.
feels
I
like
love it. I love it. I mean, I just learned what
but the width
assembly
of the
theory
cone
was
is going
the other
faster.
day from this. But
It's going really fast to where
I
eventually
like how you
all the
said the
cones
term
overlap.
shameless.
Even in a very, very, very large combinatorial space.
Alright, what is going on over here?
It just. But then again, if you're saying the universe is also growing very quickly in terms of possibilities.
I hope that as we
Dag
build
nabbit all. Renzo, what are you
as
doing?
we build
You're being
abstractions,
silly.
the main, I mean, one idea is that as we go to intelligence allows us to look at the regularities around us in the universe, and that gives us some common grounding to discuss with aliens. And you might be right that we will overlap there, even though we have completely different chemistry, literally completely different chemistry. That we will be able to pass information from one another, but it's not a given. And I have
Also,
to
you can't
kind
forget
of
about the interdimensional
try and
space
divorce
aliens.
hope and emotion, away from what I can logically justify.
It's just hard to intuit a world, a universe where there's nearly infinite complexity objects and they somehow can't detect each other.
But the universe is expanding. But the nice thing is that I would look. You see, I think Carl Sagan did the wrong thing. Well, not the wrong thing. He flicked the Voyager probe around and a pale blue dot. Said, "Look how big the universe is." I would have done it the other way around and said, "Look at the Voyager probe that came from the planet Earth, that came from Luca. Look at how big Earth is."
Then it produced that.
It produced that.
Yeah.
And that I think is like completely amazing. And then that should allow people on Earth to think about, well, probably we should try and get causal chains off Earth onto Mars, onto the moon, wherever. Well, it's human life or Martian life that we create. It doesn't matter. But I think this combinatorial space tells us something very important about the universe. And that I realized in assembly theory that the universe is too big to contain itself. Yeah. And I think this is, and now coming back, and I want to kind of change your mind about time, because I'm guessing that your time is just a coordinate.
Yeah.
So I'm going to change your.
I'm guessing you're one of those.
I'm going to change your. Not one of those. I'm going to change your mind in real time, or at least attempt.
Oh, in real time. There you go. I already got the tattoo, so this is going to be embarrassing if you change my mind.
But you can just add. An arrow of time.
Wait, what's his tattoo?
Or erase it a bit. Yeah. So, and the argument that I think that is really most interesting is like, people say the initial conditions specify the future of the universe. Okay, fine. Let's say that's the case for a moment. Now let's go back to Newtonian mechanics. Now, the uncertainty principle in Newtonian mechanics is this. If I give you the coordinates of an object moving in space, and the coordinates of another object, and they collide in space, and you know those initial conditions, you should know exactly what's going to happen. However, you cannot specify these coordinates to infinite precision. Now everyone says, this is kind of like, the chaos theory argument. No, it's deeper than that. Here's a problem with numbers. This is where Hilbert and Brouwer fell out. To have the coordinates of this object, a given object as they're colliding, you have to have them to infinite precision. That's what Hilbert says. He says, no problem, infinite precision is fine. Let's just take that for granted. But when the object is finite, and it can't store its own coordinates. So in principle, if a finite object cannot be specified to infinite precision,
not at this point.
In principle, the initial conditions don't apply.
Well, how do you know it can't store its...
Well, how do you store an infinitely long number in a finite size?
Well...
Renormalization.
We're using infinity very loosely here.
No, we're using...
Infinite precision, I mean, not loosely.
I don't know.
Very precise.
I don't know, that's my guess.
Precision is required.
Well, let's take the object. Let's say the object is a golf ball. Golf ball with a few centimeters in diameter. We can work out how many atoms are on the golf ball. And let's say we can store numbers down to atomic dislocations.
Please take note.
So we can work out how many atoms there are in the golf ball, and we can store the coordinates in that golf ball down to that number. But beyond that, we can't. Let's make the golf ball smaller. And this is where I think that we get randomness in quantum mechanics. And some people say you can't get randomness in quantum mechanics, it's deterministic. But this is where we realize that classical mechanics and quantum mechanics suffer from the same uncertainty principle. And that is the inability to specify the initial conditions to a precise enough degree to give you determinism. The universe is intrinsically too big, and that's why time exists. It's non-deterministic. Looking back into the past, you can use logical arguments, because you can say, was it true or false? You already know. But this is the fact we are unable to predict the future with the precision is not evidence of lack of knowledge. It's evidence the universe is generating new things.
Okay, so to you, first of all, quantum mechanics, you can just say statistically what's going to happen when two golf balls hit each other.
Statistically, but sure, I can say statistically what's going to happen, but then when they do happen, and you keep nesting it together, you can't. I mean, it goes almost back to look at. Let's think about entropy in the universe.
Thank you.
So how do we understand entropy change? Well, we could do or process. We can use the ergodic hypothesis. We can also have
the what hypothesis?
We can also
Future
have
me?
the
What hypothesis?
counterfactuals,
I don't know.
where we have all the different states, and we can even put that in the multiverse, right? But both those are kind of they're non-physical. The multiverse kind of collapses back to the same problem about the precision. So all if you accept you don't have to have true and false going forward into the future, the real numbers are real. They're observables.
We're trying to see exactly where time being fundamental sneaks in this difference between the golf ball can't contain its own position
Observables.
perfectly precisely.
If
how that leads to time needing to be fundamental.
Let me have a quick. What do you believe? Do you believe, or do you accept you have free will?
Yeah, I think at this moment in time, I believe that I have free will.
So then you have to believe that time is fundamental.
I understand that's a statement you've made.
Well, no, that we can logically follows, because if you don't have free will, so like if you're in a universe that has no time, the universe is deterministic. If it's deterministic, then you have no free will.
I think the space of how much we don't know is so vast.
If free will exists, that implies time exists, because time is required.
From that jumping, there's no free will. It's just too difficult of a leap.
No, I logically follows. No, I don't disagree. It's not. I'm not saying any. I mean, it's deep, and it's important. All I'm saying, and it's the difference to. It's actually different to what I've said before, is that if you don't require Platonistic mathematics, and accepts that non-determinism is how the universe looks, and that gives us our creativity and the way the universe is getting novelty, it's kind of really deeply important in assembly theory, because assembly theory starts to actually give you a mechanism why you go from boring time, which is basically initial conditions specify everything, to a mismatch in creative time. And I hope we'll do experiments. I think it's really important I would love to do an experiment that proves that time is fundamental and the universe is generating novelty. I don't know all the features of that experiment yet, but by, having these conversations openly and getting people to think about the problems in a new way, better people, more intelligent people with good mathematical backgrounds can say, oh, hey, I've got an idea. I would love to do an experiment that shows that the universe is too big for itself going forward in time. And I really, this is why I really hate the idea of the Boltzmann brain. The Boltzmann brain makes me super kind of like, everyone's having a free lunch. It's like saying, let's break all the laws of physics. So a Boltzmann brain is this idea that in a long enough universe, a brain will just emerge in the universe as conscious. And that neglects the causal chain of evolution that required to produce that brain. And this is where the computational argument really falls down, because the computationists can say, I can calculate the probability of a Boltzmann brain. And I can, and they'll give you a probability, but I can calculate the probability of a Boltzmann brain. 0.
Just because the space of possibilities is so large?
Yeah, it's like when we start fooling ourselves with numbers that we can't actually measure and we can't ever conceive of, I think it doesn't give us a good explanation. And I want to explain why life is in the universe. I think life is actually novelty miner. Life basically mines novelty almost from the future and makes it actualizes it in the present.
Okay, life is a novelty miner.
What if it's rather you need free will in order to have time?
It's actualized in the present.
Yeah, I think so.
Novelty miner. First of all, novelty. What's the origin of novelty? When you go from boring time to creative time, where's that?
Boring time to creative time.
Is it as simple as randomness, like you're referring to?
I'm really struggling with randomness, because I had a really good argument with Yasha Bark about randomness, and he just said randomness doesn't give you free will. That's insane, because you'd just be random. Yeah. But I think he's right at that level.
Yeah.
Free will contributes to the randomness.
I don't think he is right on another level. And it's not about randomness. It's about constrained. I'm going to sound like constrained opportunity. I'm making this up as I go along. So making this up. Constrained opportunity.
Oh.
So what I mean is so you have to have. So the novelty,
embarrassed.
what is novelty? You know, this is what I think is a funny thing. You ever want to discuss AI, why I think everyone's kind of gone AI mad, is that they're misunderstanding novelty. But let's think about novelty. Yes, what
But
is
it's
novelty?
really
So I think
helpful
novelty
with
is a genuinely new
making little
configuration
pretty scripts
that is
you
not predicted
want-
by the past,
y'all.
right? And that you
Future
discover
me.
in the present, right? And that is truly
have
different,
you
right? Now everyone says that
been
some
on
people
Replit
say
yet?
that novelty doesn't exist. It's
You better not
always
be
with precedent.
watching this before
I want to do
you've
experiments that
been
show
on
that
Replit.
that is not the case. And it
If
goes
you-
back to a
if you
question
are,
you asked me
shame on
a
you.
few moments ago, which is, where is the
Shame on
factory?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think the same mechanism that gives us a factory gives us novelty. And I think that is why I'm so
You know what?
deeply
Maybe
hung
I'll
up
get on
on
Replit
time. I
right
mean,
now.
of course I'm wrong, but how wrong? And I think that life opens up that combinatorial space in a way that our current laws of physics, or the as contrived in a deterministic initial condition universe, even with the get out of the multiverse, David Deutsch style, which I love, by the way, but I don't think is correct. But it's really beautiful.
Maybe I'll try
The
streaming.
David Deutsch's conception of
my
the
Replit
multiverse is kind of
coding.
like given.
There's a little
but I
streaming
think
plugin thing in there.
that the problem
and
with
I have
wave
yet to try
particle
it.
duality and quantum mechanics
May do
is
that.
not about the multiverse. It's about
I know it's terrible,
understanding how
but
determined the
I
past
play
is.
so
Well, I
much
don't
I can get
just
away
think
with
that
combining
actually this is
boring
a
time
discussion I was having
and
with
creative
Sarah
time.
about that, right? Where she was like, "Oh, I think we've been debating this for a long time
or
now
making my tasks.
about
I
how
don't know. I
we
try to make
how
it
do we
orient my
reconcile
life so that
novelty,
I
determinism,
minimize the amount of
indeterminism."
boring time I have
So,
to do.
so okay, just to clarify, you both you and Sarah
Maximize
think
the amount of
the
creative
universe
time.
is not deterministic.
With regards to
I won't speak for
work.
Sarah, but roughly,
doing
I
work.
think that the universe. I think the universe is deterministic, looking back in the past,
Right.
but undetermined going forward in
arrow
the
of
future. So I'm
time.
kind of having my cake and eating it here. This is because I fundamentally don't understand randomness, right? As Yasha told me, or other people told me. But
Wait,
if I
no, but
adopt
the
a new
arrow
view
of
now,
time
which
is...
the new view is the
entropy.
universe is just non-deterministic, but I'd like to refine that and say the universe appears
doesn't have
deterministic going
randomness.
back in the past,
So I don't have a problem
but
with randomness.
it's undetermined going forward in the future. So how can we have a universe that has deterministically looking rules that's non-determined going into the future?
Yep.
It's this breakdown in precision in the initial conditions, and we have to just stop using initial conditions and start looking at trajectories and how the combinatorial space behaves in an expanding universe in time and space. And assembly theory helps us quantify the transition to biology, and biology appears to be novelty mining because it's making crazy stuff. You know, that we are unique to Earth, right? There are objects on Earth that are unique to Earth. They will not be found anywhere else because you can do the combinatorial math.
What was that statement you made about life
Like,
is
my
novelty
phone.
mining from the future?
Yeah.
What's the little element of time that you're introducing?
So what I'm kind of meaning is because the future is bigger than the present.
Yeah.
In a deterministic universe, how do you go from the how do the states go from one to another? I mean, there's a mismatch, right?
Yeah.
So that must mean that you have a little bit of indeterminism, whether that's randomness or something else. I don't understand. I want to do experiments to formulate a theory
Why
to
does it
refine
have
that
to
to go
be
forward that might help us
either
explain
or?
that.
Why can't it
And
be
then-
both?
And I think that's why I'm so determined to try and crack the non-life to life transition, looking at networks and molecules, and that might help us
He
think about
wants
it,
to
the
crack the
mechanism.
life.
But certainly the
non-life
future
to
is bigger
life
than the past
transition.
in my conception of the universe, in some conception of the universe. And
By the way, that's not obvious, right? That's what was just kind of the
That
future
is a
being
good
bigger than the
question,
past.
I don't know if I would go
Well,
about trying to
that's one
sneak it,
statement, and
the
the
answer
statement
to
that
it
the universe is not
necessarily.
big enough to contain the future is another statement.
yeah,
I personally
Yeah,
don't feel
That one is a
called
big
to
one.
do that.
I
That was a really big one.
I think so. But I think it's entirely because look, we have the second
Life
law,
Mhm.
and right now, I mean, we don't need the second law if the future's bigger than the past. It follows
Right.
naturally.
Right.
So why are
But-
we retrofitting all these sticking
Or to shoot
plasters
objective
onto our
protection.
reality to hold on to a timeless universe.
Yeah, but that's because it's kind of difficult to imagine the universe that's that can't contain the future.
But isn't that really exciting?
It's very exciting, but it's it's hard. I mean, we're humans on Earth, and we have a very kind of four-dimensional conception of the world, of 3D plus time. It's just hard to intuit a world where, what does that even mean? A universe that can't contain the future.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy,
Weird.
but obvious.
It's weird. I mean, I suppose it sounds obvious, yeah, if it's true.
But the nice thing is you can. So what I mean, so the reason
don't
why
see
assembly theory turned me onto that was that let's just start in the present and look at all the complex molecules and go backwards in time, and understand how evolutionary processes gave rise to them. It's not at all obvious that Taxol, which is one of the most complex natural products produced by biology, was going to be invented by biology. It's an accident. You know, Taxol is unique to Earth. There's no Taxol elsewhere in the universe, and Taxol was not decided by the initial conditions.
Randomness.
It was decided by this kind of this interplay between the past simply is embedded in the present. It gives some features, but why the past doesn't map to the future one-to-one is because the universe is too big to contain itself. That gives space for creativity,
but not the
novelty, and some things which are unpredictable.
Well,
maybe.
Okay, so given that you're disrespecting the power of the initial conditions,
I'm uncertain about
let me
it.
ask you about, so how do you explain that cellular automata are able to produce such incredible complexity?
All right, well, I'm gonna pause this. Yeah, this is a good moment, I think. Very good. Excellent work, everyone. Take care. Be safe. And, be seeing you.